Welcome to Keeping Track of a Rapidly Changing World on ThinkTech Hawaii. I'm your host, Jay Fidell. This episode is called Argentina, Renaissance and New Star of South America. Argentina Turns Around. Our co-host for the show is Shackley Raffetto. Welcome to the show, Shackley.
Great to be here with you, Jay.
So, this is a huge subject, and if you start researching it, you find it's a deep subject. It's a big country. It's got a complicated history, of which we do not know enough. We need to know more. So, what is your general perception of the country after looking at it?
Well, it's a beautiful, big country, and it has a lot of really wonderful agricultural and natural resources. It's the only South American country I've actually been to. I've been in Buenos Aires, so I can actually share some of my personal experiences. But Argentina is pretty famous, I think, around the world, unlike some of the other South American countries that people couldn't point to on the map. It's the country of the tango, of the pampas and the gaucho, which people have heard of. Great steaks, great Malbec red wine, and lots of other things that make it a really interesting country. And I think it would be. I'd love to go back. Actually, it's a wonderful country. Let's see. It's called the Argentine Republic. It's on the southeast part of South America, sort of opposite the Andes of Chile. It's on the mid to South Atlantic Ocean, long coast that goes all the way down to, what's it called? The tip of South America, in any case. Argentina actually claims part of Antarctica under some treaties, and of course they still claim the British South Atlantic islands, the Falklands and South Georgia, which I'll talk more about later. The population is about 47 million people. It's a big country. It's over 1 million square miles. It's the second largest country in South America and the 8th largest country in the whole world. So it's right up there in terms of its size. One of its really interesting geographical features is the Andes Mountains, which run several thousand, it's like 3,000 miles, 40,300 to 5,500 miles. The Andes runs down South America and forms the boundary between Chile and Argentina, and it's an enormous mountain range. Let's see, it's about 1,000 mountains. 100 of its mountains are more than 20,000 feet tall, and wow. Mount Aconcagua, which is the highest mountain in the Western Hemisphere, is up in the north, and it's part of Argentina, and it's over 22,000 feet tall. So it's not a whole lot shorter than Mount Everest. So it's got some really extraordinary features. One of the features it has is the Iguazu Falls, which are the largest waterfalls in the world. They're not the highest, but they're the largest in terms of expansive, bigger than Niagara Falls. They're considered one of the 7 modern natural wonders of the world. It's right on the corner between Brazil, which is up in the north, and Argentina. And then I mentioned Mount Aconcagua. Let's see. It's a big agricultural producer. I mentioned the gauchos. They are in what's called the Pampas area of Argentina, which is in the north, and it's a huge grassland. It's about 460,000 square miles. So it's almost kind of like Central Asia, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan and those places where the Mongols roam the grasslands. Well, in South America and Argentina, it's the gauchos roaming the pampas. And that's where the huge cattle ranches are. And they have these ranches out there called estancia. And actually you can go and stay there. And the estancias often have a comparable restaurant where they serve their beef in Buenos Aires. I visited one, and I have to say, the beef in Argentina is the best I've ever tasted. It's just amazing, and they serve it up with a big glass of Malbec red wine, and that's very, very common. See people having that for lunch. One of their biggest agriculture outputs is soybeans, mostly purchased by China, and I guess in competition with America. And President Trump, talking to the Chinese about their soybean purchase of American soybeans. So Argentina is a bit in competition there. They also raise a lot of corn, yerba mate, which is a kind of tea, which is a very popular drink in Argentina. And let's see, China buys a huge amount of them. China is the largest export partner, which I'll get to more as we go along. And Argentina is part of the Belt and Road Initiative with China, which we've talked about before. One of the things that's coming online in Argentina, which may be what saves it economically, is it's been a long time producer of crude oil, but they've recently discovered huge deposits of shale oil in a place called Vaca Muerta, as well as natural gas fields, and they're huge reserves. They do have a problem. You're going to have to build a pipeline from the Vaca Muerta down to the coast if they want to export the gas. But they talk about it like being the silver bullet for the future economy of Argentina, and that may well be true, given the way the world is going these days. Now, historically, Argentina was discovered by the West, at least, by Amerigo Vespucci in about 1502, sailing down the coast to see what he could see. And Buenos Aires was founded around 1580, and there was several colonies set up by Spain in that area. One was called the Viceroyalty of the Rio de la Plata, and some other similar types of colonies were set up. Here's an interesting factoid for you. Argentina in 1819 was the first international nation to recognize Hawaii as an independent kingdom. They recognized King Kamehameha as an independent kingdom. How about that? Did you know that? Argentina stretches from the 22nd latitude down to 55 south. So 22 south is about the same distance below the equator as Hawaii is north of the equator. So in northern Argentina, it's pretty warm and humid in parts. It's almost like Hawaii, maybe like Pukalani or someplace like that, or Kohala. But then, of course, it stretches out way down below. In July 9, 1816, Argentina declared its independence from Spain. They expanded down all the way to the tip of South America. The southern part is called Patagonia, which you've probably heard of. It's kind of an arid plain. By 1908, it was considered the seventh wealthiest nation in the world, and it had encouraged immigration from Europe about the same time that America was encouraging immigration from Europe. So we had huge immigration from Italy and Spain in particular, and today about 95% of the population of Argentina is of European origin. There are still some remnants of native groups, but not very many, apparently. When the Depression of 1930s came along, it hit Argentina, like other countries, very, very hard. And it precipitated the takeover of the government by various military juntas. And that led to the gradual long-term decline economically of the nation. After World War II, Juan Perón became president of Argentina. He's an infamous person. And his wife was Eva Perón, referred to as Evita, and was featured in was the famous musical Don't Cry for Me, Argentina. and she became kind of a folk hero. She actually died in around 1951 of cancer, but her husband came in and he was kind of a populist, but he was also a military guy and a dictator. But what he did was dictate the population is he provided a whole lot of subsidies and giveaways and freebies at government expense, and he provided a whole lot of government jobs that probably really weren't justified economically. So it really began to tax the economy of the country. Plus, it was recovering from the Depression and World War II, and and so it began to suffer. And he also was a very violent guy, I guess. He had secret police, and he really oppressed his opponents. They got rid of the Supreme Court. They got rid of the political parties. So it was a real military takeover. After he left, he died in late 1950s. There became a period that the Argentines referred to as the Dirty War. This was a time when the government was run by a military junta and had tight control over the population. But it was also a time when there were a lot of leftist student activity young people mostly, who were trying to change things, kind of like the 60s, I guess, were in the U.S., if you think about it. And the government decided that the way to deal with these people was to kill them. And so that's why they call it the Dirty War period. And so they used military resources to disappear people. They would kidnap, mostly these were young people. They would kidnap them. They would take them to a particular place right in Buenos Aires. They would torture them. If they were women, they would rape them. And then they would inject them with some sort of sedative, and they would put them on these cargo planes, small cargo planes, and take them out over the Atlantic Ocean and throw them out. And they killed 25 to 30,000 people that way over that period of time. And it wasn't until this military junta decided to attack the British in the Falkland Islands that this whole period came to an end in Argentina. And as you may recall, it's kind of, I guess it sounds a bit like Chairman Xi talking about invading Taiwan they perhaps used this attack on the Falklands as a diversion. Anyway, it didn't work. As you may recall, the British organized under Margaret Thatcher. They sent submarines and ships down. They sunk the Admiral Belgrano with a huge loss of Argentine sailors, and they defeated the Argentines within a relatively short period of time. That brought this period to an end because the people, I guess, finally decided they had enough of this military junta, and they elected a new president in 1983, and that began a gradual transition back to something like a democratic rule. But of course, the whole country was an economic mess by then, and had been pretty badly brutalized because of all of this military control. Final presidents, I guess, before Miiei were the Dualde and Christina Kirchner, who had started to deal with the corruption but hadn't really got very far. And Javier Miiei is an interesting guy. He became president in 2023. He's the guy who would walk around with the chainsaw and show he's gonna cut the expenses, he's gonna cut the bureaucracy, and he's gonna solve the economic problems of Argentina that way. He was actually a professional economist. He had been a economics professor. He had some controversies about his history. But he became popular enough to become elected. His basic idea was to take a chainsaw and to cut expenses so that that would solve the economic problem. And the problems he faced were pretty big. It was about 200% inflation, if you can imagine that, to the point where people didn't trust the peso, the Argentine money. And so what they would do is if they got pesos, they would convert them into dollars. They would not put their money into a savings bank because they didn't trust the bank, and the deflation of the currency was occurring constantly. So the value of their peso was decreasing over time, and the only way they could conserve their value was to buy dollars, and that's what they did. Poverty was about 50%. So he had a lot of challenges when he came in. One of the problems was the unions were very, very strong, and they had over time extracted so many concessions from private industry that private industry would not hire any more people than they absolutely have to. One example was given that if a person was hired and they were paid $100, let's say, the employer had to pay an additional $65 for social benefits for every $100 they paid an employee. So it made it extremely uneconomic for private employers to hire employees. So what they did was people would get paid dollars usually under the table, or a company would incorporate outside of Argentina and do business in Argentina using employees in another country that wasn't subject to all these draconian taxes, basically. Also, under the junta and Peronis, the bureaucracy became very big because that was one way to get support, would be to provide these government jobs to people. So Miiei decided he wanted to cut that bureaucracy. The currency was unstable, as I mentioned. It was constantly devalued, and there were a lot of subsidies and social programs that Miiei felt the government simply couldn't afford. So what he did was he fired thousands of public employees, and he cut back substantially on the subsidies. Because what was happening is the government was running at a deficit on an annual basis, and the way they would cover the deficit is they would print money, which would cause a devaluation in the value of the peso. So he wanted to stop that cycle, and that's the way he did it. Is he cut the bureaucracy and he cut the subsidies, and now he's recently passed a law to try to reduce the power of the unions, who have caused the problem that I just described. And as a result of that, he's had some pretty good success. He brought down he got rid of the deficit pretty quickly, and so now there's no deficit. And one of the problems that created also was foreign companies were reluctant to invest in Argentina because of the lack of economic stability in the country, and that was very important in terms of the oil, which I talked about. They would be seeking international investment in order to develop those oil resources for the economic benefit of the country. Well, recently you may have read about the United States provided a $20 billion currency swap for Argentina to assist them in meeting their deficit problem. And I guess the way that works is that it provides 20 billion US dollars in exchange for pesos to the Argentine government in order to shore up the finances of the Central Bank of Argentina. And I don't know if I can get much more into all the economics of this, because it gets rather complicated. But basically what he did is he cut a lot of these expenses, and as a result, he's getting pretty good results. He hasn't, the next step would be to allow the peso to free float against the dollar. I'd like to try to explain now the economic situation in Argentina that the new president, Javier Miiei, has attempted now to solve for the country. As I mentioned earlier, it was very successful until the early 1900s, and then it was just destroyed economically by the succession of military in any case, in the past, what they did in order to solve the problems of deficits, so they would raise taxes, they would borrow money, they would devalue their currency, and they would borrow money from the International Monetary Fund, which they defaulted on numerous times, and so they just continued to repeat the disasters of the past. So Miiei came in, and what he decided to do is he felt that and being an economist, this was his view, that if he could stop the annual deficit in the budget, he would be able to stabilize the economy. So that was what his chainsaw was for. It was to cut the subsidies that had been put into place by the former governments, and he also fired a whole lot of people who had government jobs, and so he cut the expenses of the government, he cut the expenses of the subsidies, and he has now he's struggling with the unions because that's part of the law, but he's just put a new bill into their legislature to try to curtail the power of the unions, so that private employers will be encouraged to hire people on a legal basis, so that they don't have to pay under the table dollars on the black market for employees, which will help a lot. Now, very quickly after he made these huge cuts, he balanced the budget, and that has made a huge difference. It has brought the inflation rate, which was about 200%. You can imagine 200% inflation rate a year, both come down to somewhere around 30%. So he had enormous, pretty fast changes. We'll have to see if those will continue, but that's what he has done. And I also want to talk a little bit about the interests of China in Argentina. As I mentioned, Argentina is part of the China Belt and Road Initiative. China has made substantial investments in a portion of its lithium deposits to China, and sells a large portion of its soybean crops to China, as well as other things. And China exports into Argentina electronics and things like that. There are now some complaints, apparently, by Argentine businesses that China is dumping or making available, I guess, underselling products into the Argentine government. And also, China has established a space tracking station in southern Argentina, which is probably gathering intelligence as well. So that's a basic overview. So far, so good, I think, would be the way to describe it. We'll see. Now, recently, Javier Miiei was reelected, and prior to his reelection, there was real fear in the country that he would not be reelected, and they would go back to the way things were before. And public confidence really dropped, apparently. But now it seems to be back, and as long as these changes can be sustained and produce results for the people, and they can develop these oil resources that I described earlier, things may be on the upswing for Argentina. I hope so. It's a lovely country and deserves to have all the success it can build for itself.
I'd like to explore with you a little about who lives there. You said there were plenty of Europeans. Is there a German community that came over after the war? Who's there? I know that there were native people way back when, many tens of thousands of years ago. Do you know where they came from? Who's the population?
My understanding is that in the northern part of Argentina, there was some Inca presence in Neolithic times, and there were native groups in Patagonia and other areas, but they were pretty much suppressed by the Spanish, as was their their MO, when the conquistadors came into South America. So the population is basically about 95% derived from European origins. The Germans is an interesting thing because we've all heard about how some German or Nazi war criminals got to South America, including Argentina, during the war. Interestingly, they have found 3 World War II German U-boats sunk off the coast of Argentina, 2 of which they can account for. They can't account for the third. So that's pretty interesting. So there were always those stories about, well, Adolf Hitler escaped Argentina. I don't think that's true. We do know that some of the Nazi war criminals, like Adolf Eichmann, I think Adolf Eichmann was in Argentina, wasn't he, when he was apprehended by the Mossad and taken to Israel and put on trial. Apparently, the numbers are not huge, but there were some people that were brought by the Odessa down to Argentina. But former presidents were the Kirchners, so there is a Germanic presence there. But they may have came along with Europeans during the time of the general European immigration as well. So when you go there, it's interesting. They speak Spanish, but the Spanish is really different than in Spain or Mexico. It's more melodious. It's more like Italian sounding, at least to my ear. Spanish can be kind of harsh sounding. It's a lovely city. It looks like a European city. I mean, you'd think you were in Brussels or someplace.
It's so interesting. It's sort of like if you go back and look at European history, you find, you and I have spoken about this, you find battles and contentions and civil wars and the like that were really gruesome. And the same thing in Argentina. Argentina had so many upsets and coup d'etat and civil war type experiences over the years. And, to the extent that it has an arguable democracy now, this is fairly recent, because up till, even well before the 1816 independence, and then after, there was plenty of bloodshed. Now that it's not limited to Argentina. A lot of European countries have had that experience. And I think we can look through Argentina like a keyhole to all of Latin America and see how very brutal it was in terms of the pre-independence and post-independence, where people were killing each other, and then the governments that surfaced were repressive. And Perón is a good example of that. But you have Peróns in so many countries, in the history of so many countries in Latin America. So it's disturbing to think that they had the resources, they had the possibilities, but they couldn't get their act together on exactly how you make a civil society. And to the extent that Miiei is a civil society, I'm not so sure that the jury's out on that, as far as I can see. That they have squandered their opportunities over so many hundreds of years. And I suppose I would say, and I'd be interested in your thoughts about this, is the Spanish did not give them a good experience to teach them about the value of democracy, about how you do democracy, how you do a civil society. Am I right?
Well, during the early years when the Spanish came in and colonized Argentina, they were there looking for gold and silver and things like that. They were extracting things from South America. They weren't there to colonize it like happened with the Protestants and the English immigration into the United States and Canada. It was a different motive, I think. This is just my feeling, in that it wasn't until you had the large-scale European immigration at the end of the 1800s that you really had a basis maybe to establish some democracies, though there weren't many democracies in Europe at that time, right? So
true.
Yep.
There was a lot of brutality in all of those wars in
Yes.
Europe and also in Latin America. And, I guess the interesting part is that somewhere along the line, Europe became more civilized, but a lot of countries in Latin America did not.
The one thing to remember is there is a Peronist political party in Argentina that basically has the same old views that Juan Perón put in place way back in the 50s and later in the 70s. And and when there was some doubt about whether Javier Miiei would be reelected, the worry was that that Peronist party would get back in control and things would go south again. So it's still a touch and go situation as far as I can see. Miiei has made some progress. He's got the friendship of President Trump apparently, and so the United States put together this $20 billion currency swap. I don't quite understand it. I think that provides Argentina with $20 billion of U.S. dollars to help shore up its central bank and the value of its currency. It also has a similar arrangement with China, interestingly enough. I don't know why they would want yuan, but probably to buy Chinese services and
Mm.
and exports as part of the Belt and Road Initiative. I'm not sure about that.
It's interesting that, there was criticism. There is criticism of Trump's move to give them $20 billion when, in fact, we have a growing deficit. And we, haven't done that for, I think, any other country in Latin America. And here, $20 billion is a lot of money when you're depleting the federal, the federal government and all those people who've lost their jobs. And at the same time, you're essentially giving away $20 billion to a guy who doesn't have a lot of connection with the U.S. So what are your thoughts about that? I mean, was it the right move? Was it a move that somehow is in the interest of the United States, or was it a move that that reflects Trump's view of not first America, but feathering the nests of his friends around the world?
Well, who knows really? But my view is that he's trying to reach out and establish a better relationships between the United States and the countries in South America. Probably mostly motivated by the fact that the Chinese have made so many inroads in South America through the Belt and Road Initiative, and so this is probably perceived as a good place to start. If Miiei can turn Argentina around with the help of the United States and not become too dependent upon China, that might be a really good thing. And Miiei has, in the past, recent past, I guess, expressed the view that he could work with other nearby South American countries to try to move towards more market type economies, which would probably be a good thing so that they don't become too dependent on these huge investments through the Belt and Road Initiative.
He is out and trying to create a sort of group of countries in Latin America to join up on that and to try to take advantage of their collective resources and make an economic union of it. I don't know how far he's got with that, but it's an admirable idea. And it's something that Latin America, would benefit by and should have had years and years and years ago. And when the United States originally established the Organization of American States, OAS, back in I guess it was in the 50s, that's what we should have been doing, but we didn't do it. So query, what are the prospects of success on Milei's attempt to gather up a handful of countries in Latin America and make an economic group out of them?
And he also has backtracked a little bit on his position on China. Initially, he said that he wanted to remove Argentina from the Belt and Road influence, but now he's saying, well, Argentina should do business with both the U.S. and China. And apparently he's been invited to come to China to meet Chairman Xi in 2026. So he just sounds like a politician now. He does he can, but it doesn't hurt that we're helping him. It seems to me, and I think that the value of that currency swap will be that it makes a pretty solid connection between the United States and Argentina, and that may help us in the long run in South America generally.
Well, aside from the currency swap, which I think when you shake it and bake it, it's a $20 million gift. Did I say million? Sorry, $1 billion gift. Aside from that, what kind of presence do we have down there? What kind of relations do we have? What kind of trade arrangements do we have? I mean, they do have good beef, as you said, and they have soy, but I'm not sure we need soy. We have plenty of soy here. And for that matter, we have plenty of beef here. But what relations do we have, either in trade or American investment?
I believe that the American oil companies have invested in South America. I'm not aware of any other investments. I do know that it's hard to. When I was in Argentina and we were coming home, there was a big concession at the airport where you could buy big containers of Argentine beef, and people were buying these, and taking them on the plane. And I thought, wow, what a great idea! But you couldn't bring them to America.
Well, is that part of the plan? This $20 billion gift. I mean, aside from trying to show Miiei that the U.S. is interested and would like to prop him up economically, with money. It's just money. What else comes in the package? Because ideally, and I have believed this for many years, is that we need to reinforce our relationships with all of these countries and with Latin America as a group of countries. So is that $20 billion connected with some kind of arrangement where, aside from the oil you mentioned, where the United States actually gets in there, rolls up its sleeves, and creates a robust relationship, whether it's investment or trade, or maybe it's just helping them out in terms of healthcare, in terms of expertise, in terms of business advice, anything and everything. Are we doing that, or is this just here's the money? Our oil magnates will love having better relations with you, and as for everything else, it's like it was.
I don't know. The reason I was there, this is some years ago now, so things have changed maybe, but the reason I was there was a military to military connection. We were there to provide training to the Argentine military in our areas of rule of law and related subjects, to try to establish a relationship with their military. Those kinds of exchanges are useful, and I think today with their military would be very valuable to start there. Maybe I'm not aware of anything specific that we're doing, although it would seem like we must be thinking about ways to reach out to support Miiei.
It's not like Central America, for sure. I mean, Buenos Aires is an advanced city. It's a cosmopolitan city, as you said. And if you go there, even now today, it's quite impressive. As other cities, in Latin America, especially South America, cities we don't talk about that much. But I have not heard of Argentinians running away from gangs, running away from cartels, trying to cross the southern border of the United States, coming to this country and becoming undocumented aliens, being picked up by Homeland Security and all that. They're not part of that group. They're in another category altogether. Am I right?
That's a very good point. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, as far as I know, the cartels are further north.
The other thing is that the people that I know who have lived in Buenos Aires, I mean, Argentinians, they have had a lot of fear, even in recent years, about I call it the shadow of Perón, about being picked up, about being disappeared and all that. The old Latin American thing. And I think that still exists, maybe to a lesser extent than when Perón was around. Is Miiei doing that sort of thing? Are there still repressive steps taken? Because it's very troubling, for us to go in there and say, here, we're going to help you. But at the same time, you can continue to disappear people.
Well, when we were in Argentina, we were there as a part of a group of military officers to provide training with the Argentine military and government officials. And we were at a special building in downtown Buenos Aires, controlled by the military. And I noticed that the Argentine officers were all in civilian clothes while we were in our uniforms. And during the afternoon, I decided to just go for a walk. So I went outside and I walked down to the store and bought something. And I walked around to see the sights. And when I came back, one of the officers who had been in my class approached me and he said, he says, you should not go out of this building. He says, if they see you, they will kill you. I said, who are they? And, which hadn't happened to me before.
Whereupon you immediately went back to the hotel. Well, anyway, it's a mixed bag. I mean, they got these really terrific resources, which sounds like to me that although China has taken some advantage of that, fact is they're not a big export country. And the fact is they're not really taking advantage of those resources, in terms of American investment anyway. And so I like the idea that Miiei is trying to organize a group of Latin American countries, but it all goes to the question of whether they are organizable. He must have his hands full when he turns around and says, "Oh, okay, why don't you guys join our little group?" And they all say, "No, we have our immediate problems. We're busy trying to settle down our government." And so many countries in Latin America are still in that place. So, how close is Argentina to a real democracy under Miiei or under his successor?
Well, after the dirty war that I described, they did prosecute some of the leaders of the military who engaged in those murders. I'm not sure what their sentences were, but there was some sort of, societal reconciliation about that. And that has been some time now, so those folks will be pretty old by now who participated in it, so they maybe have gone by that. I think they have good universities, and if they can get some economic prosperity makes a lot of difference in whether you can have a democracy that works. And if that economic prosperity comes through the oil that can be developed, they have plenty of agriculture, very good quality agriculture. They really are kind of a breadbasket of South America, if you think about it, compare it to the other countries. And so I think that if they can get economically off on their feet for a period of time, it's such early days. It's hard to tell.
What about precious metals and rare earth and the like? When I started doing my research, which was much less detailed than yours, I said to myself, Argentina. In the Latin, argent means money. It means silver. And lo and behold, my research confirmed that the name of the country was based in part, at least in part, on the notion of silver and money. Are there precious metals in Argentina?
Silver. That's why the Spanish were there, right? Looking for gold and silver. Apparently they were both. I don't know what the extent is now. Lithium is a big export, of course, as I mentioned, to the Chinese, and I'm sure pretty lucrative. And there are other resources that they must have. I'm just not aware of the extent of them.
Let's take a moment about the Chinese. The Chinese are all over Latin America, and there are probably no exceptions. Every single country has a Chinese presence or a Chinese deal. or Chinese port that the Chinese built, or Chinese mines to get metals and precious earths, valuable earths. So I guess the question is, what have we done aside from this $20 billion gift? What have we done? What could we do in order to recapture? We styled the name of this show as Argentina's Renaissance, and how it is becoming the star of South America. But it can only do that, okay, if we agree that it is a star as far as we're concerned, right? That it is a renaissance as far as we're concerned, and somehow we can displace. Are we displacing? Can we displace? How can we displace the Chinese?
Well, I think the 20 billion loan was probably a start, and I think there'll be other initiatives after that. And I think the fact that it doesn't appear to be a narco state like Venezuela had become is encouraging. So there's the possibility that there can be real democratic reform without being bogged down with all that type of corruption. I'm sure there's some other types of corruption there. Seems to be a lot in South America, but I don't know the extent. I guess they have the civil law system. I don't know exactly much about their legal system. Apparently, it worked well enough to put the generals who promoted the dirty war on trial and to bring them to justice. So it looks like they have a functioning judicial system.
We've been talking about the relationship of Argentina and the U.S. in large part. What about the relationship of Argentina and Spain and Europe? Do they have an ongoing trade arrangement with Europe? Is it happening? Will it happen? And how much does it mean to them?
Well, the oil and gas could be, to the extent that Europe looks to places other than Russia for its petroleum resources and depends on petroleum resources. Argentina could be, I would think, a viable source, especially for natural gas.
Yeah. Well, they've been an ally of the United States, and that's important. And in a sense, I think they've been an ally of some countries in Europe. Even if Spain was not a good colonial power, I think they have they have the language, they have the culture from Spain. They must have some affinity for Spain. And it's a natural trading partner. It's a natural connection with Spain. Anyway, what else do you want to say about Argentina and its prospects, both south of Middle America, south of Central America, and its relationship with the U.S.? Where do we go from here? What role does it play? It is almost as big as Brazil. It's got enormous prospects, but I'm afraid it hasn't really developed those prospects as well as it could have. Where does it fit in this new renaissance?
I think it could be the leader because it could be self-sufficient and very prosperous, and it's not burdened by the narco terrorist threat that the northern part of South America and Central America are having to deal with. They first have to deal with that before they can really talk about a viable democracies. Argentina doesn't seem to have that challenge. Plus the great agricultural and natural resources. I think it really is a star, as I described it, that can step forward and lead South America forward.
Would you go there again? Would you invest there?
I don't know about invest. We have to see how the rule of law does down there, and the Miiei reforms, how sustainable those are. But I would definitely go visit. It's a lovely country. I'd love to go out into the countryside, go down to Patagonia, stay in an estancia, eat lots of beef, and drink some Malbec.
Would you wear your uniform?
No.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Thanks to our co-host, our guest, Shackley Raffetto. I'm Jay Fidell, host of Keeping Track of the Rapidly Changing World Around Us. The title of this episode is Argentina, Renaissance, and New Star of South America. Thanks to our viewers for watching. We'll see you again soon for the next one. Aloha.
Right. Aloha, Jay.